I'm a bad motherfucker.
This is where you start seeing like random famous actors. This is Elaine from Seinfeld, of course, much younger. 1985. They start smoking pot, because that was another thing. Like, you didn't see that a whole lot in 1970s movies. You know, there was Cheech and Chong and stuff like that, but in early 80s movies, even like, I remember I watched as a kid, I watched the first Poltergeist movie. And because I was a kid, I had no idea that in the beginning of that movie, the parents are smoking a joint while their children are going to bed. I just thought they were smoking a cigarette. I didn't know what a joint was. But if you go back and watch a lot of these movies as an adult, I mean, they're smoking pot like it's a normal thing. So that's been normalized. You know, the whole, like this is a celebratory thing. This character is not being shamed. It's a joke, sure. But it's like, yeah, he got so fucked up, he passed out on the floor. Mission accomplished. So he's in he's the next day, he's at his boomer paradise McMansion suburban home. You know, his mom is on the exercise bike. His dad is on some weird exercise machine. And they're telling him, you know, they're so proud. They're so proud that he got into Harvard. However, they want him to be a man. They want him to be a man, and they tell him, you're going to have to pay your own tuition. You're going to have to pay for all your books, your housing, everything. Because he's decided, his dad, that he's got to learn how to pull himself up by his bootstraps and do what he did. Now, this next scene, he's freaking out about the cost of going to Harvard. Now, remember, this is Harvard. This isn't State College. This is Harvard. Now, I want you to listen carefully when he talks about how expensive going to Harvard Law was in 1985. Now, you want to know about inflation? Well, this isn't just inflation. Now, a lot of this is inflation, but a lot of it is this idea that everyone has to go to college, and so everyone has to get financial aid, and so the prices skyrocketed.
Tuition and fees, $10,493. Estimated annual living expenses, $7,500.
That's right. If you made 20 grand, 20 grand a year, that would pay for going to Harvard Law and your living expenses. Harvard Law, only $10,000. And living expenses while you're going to Harvard Law, about $8,000. So you make 20 grand a year, you got money to spare. You can party with that money.
Total for 3 years of law school, $53,979.
That's right. To graduate from Harvard Law, $53,000. That's it. That's all you needed. Now again, inflation. but also the cost of education has skyrocketed.
Okay, but don't you think you're overreacting?
No.
Prudence.
So now he knows that he can't get his parents to pay for the tuition and stuff, and he's doing what a lot of us did. Now this is 1985. I did this in the late 90s. Same sort of thing. I was like, oh yeah, I finished high school. And now it's time to go to college. Now it's time to go to college. And so I started looking at ways of going to college. I started looking for grants. I started looking for any kind of financial aid because my parents weren't going to pay for my college either. And I worked in fast food. I did not have a lot of money. And so I was looking at ways that I could pay for it. And I had very similar experiences to this.
Ridiculous. There's nothing here even remotely qualified.
Wait a second. Look at this. The Henry Q. Bouchard Memorial Fellowship, full tuition plus $8,000 annual stipend to the most qualified applicant from Los Angeles, California.
Let me see that. The most qualified black applicant, you idiot.
Oh.
And that's when you started seeing real institutional racism for the first time. You started seeing policy in black and white, written there in not just, it wasn't just a few, in almost the majority of grants that I would otherwise qualify for. And then you'd get to the bottom and it would say, if you're a woman or a minority. There was so much financial aid that specifically excluded white men that I eventually gave up. So this character is like, fuck, what am I going to do? And he calls up and tries to get financial aid from other organizations.
Well, I realize my father makes a lot of money, but you see, he's not giving me any. I see. You have a nice day too, man.
What did she say?
She said they had financial aid for people whose parents are poor, not people whose parents are assholes.
Now, this is a problem I ran into also. My parents made too much money. And they based your financial aid, even if you were claiming, as I was, an independent, on my taxes. My parents were not claiming me as a dependent. I was out of the house at 17. I was totally independent. But they still wanted to know what your parents made and based their approval on what your parents made up until something crazy like 25, age 25. Maybe it was 21, but I think it was 25. And so because my parents made too much money, even though I was living literally in poverty, I was denied. And this happened to a lot of white kids from the suburbs with boomer parents who threw them out there and said, oh, go be a man, not realizing, or maybe they did and just didn't care, that this was the reality for their kids. You weren't getting, your admission standards were higher. Your possibilities for grants were pretty much zero. Financial aid, that you would have to pay back, was next to zero. And getting loans was also almost impossible. Because if they made too much money, they would base a lot of that stuff on your parents' income too. So he goes and tries to get a loan, and he's denied because he doesn't have a credit history, because he's a high school graduate, and his parents make too much money. And then he goes to talk to the therapist that convinced his boomer dad that he should spend the college fund that he'd been saving for his son on himself. He goes and talks to this therapist to say, can you just talk to my dad again and say not to do that, because I can't get into college, or I got into college. I got into Harvard Law, but I can't afford it.
Shut up! You're all alike. You'll bleed us dry with nothing but bones, and when we finally crumble to dust, you'll dance in our ashes and go windsurfing.
And that was the boomer attitude. Again, it didn't start with millennials. Once they got their ball of money, no one was going to fucking touch it, not even their kids. It was all about them. And he goes into the lobby as he leaves, and he sees a whole line of other boomer dads waiting to get that same advice. So he comes up with a solution. He gets accepted for financial aid by, as you can probably guess, pretending to be black. Now, we've actually seen real life experiences of this. There was that, I think it was the brother of that Indian girl from The Office that played Kelly. She was also one of the writers. Her brother made national news because he shaved his head. He was Indian, but he shaved his head and pretended to be black to get into law school. And it worked. And so he tells his friend after he gets into Harvard and he gets the financial aid, I got these pills. They're experimental suntan. I mean, it's stupid, but whatever. Experimental suntan pills, and that's how I look black. And, I have a perm and I'm just going to pretend to be black. And his friend's like, okay, but you're going to have to pretend to be black for 3 years. And now we'll hear, well, that's not a problem. Because this was the Gen X view of black people at the time. Again, 1985.
You're gonna have to be a black person.
No shit.
Yeah, but for 3 years, Mark. 3 years, what's that gonna be like?
Gordo, it's gonna be great. These are the 80s, man. It's the Cosby decade. America loves black people.
And America did. Many of the most popular musicians were black. Many of the most popular television shows, he named one of them, The Cosby Show. Black. People talk about the golden era of race relations being the 90s. Really, I think it was more the late 80s. Because starting in the 90s, they started to overplay their hand. It ceased to be, we're all getting along, and it started to be white people are now the butt of the joke. Harmless seeming at first, but that's where it began. So he says, I don't care. I'll pretend to be black for 3 years. I mean, people will think I'm cool. And then, of course, he starts to experience little bits of racism for the first time as a white person. That they move into his apartment, and the landlord doesn't like that one of them's black.
Something wrong, Mr. McGrady?
Yeah, there may be a problem here. You know, when your mother rented this place for you, she never told me that your roommate was a,
What?
black.
What?
A black Negro.
And then Leslie Nielsen, another, again, there's a weird amount of random, kind of famous people, you know. So Leslie Nielsen plays, like, he's the one that actually owns the building. And he tells the super, you know, if they do anything at all, give me any excuse at all to evict them. We're going to evict them because we don't want black people in our building. They go to a party that's kind of part of the Harvard Law orientation, and these white guys are telling racist jokes. He meets this black chick that got into Harvard also and is instantly smitten by her. His law professor, of course, is the voice of Darth Vader, a black guy. What's this guy? I always forget this guy's name. Anyway, you guys know, the voice of Darth Vader guy. But here we start to see another narrative. You know, in addition, just like the obvious stuff that's in every Hollywood movie where black people are, they're all always the good people and the white people are the bad people, and you know, he's the law professor is black, and you know what I mean, and the evil landlord is white, that sort of a thing. But they also start to try to disassemble a fear that white people